in the next talk, which is 12 takeaways for corporate communications. Cristina is from Walnut Unlimited, and at Walnut Unlimited, she is the main nut, which means she founded the company. She published her first paper in consumer neuroscience in 2006 and is a frequent speaker at our industry conferences, and we have some great examples from applied consumer neuroscience next.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thanks for inviting me. Today, I'm going to talk about these 12 insights, and these are insights that I have been learning throughout these 8 years in the field of neuroscience and a few more in advertising industry. And I think we feel quite generous, to share with you almost everything we know. And I give you, I think, a guide, because one of the most important criticisms around consumer neuroscience when the clients challenge us is, so what? What can I do with that? So here is just an example of actions that you can take from these learnings. So we collected 12 insights, and 6 of them are going to be explained with a little bit more detail, with examples, and after with the action that you could take from. And the other 6 are explained more briefly, but still they will be explained by examples. The first human insight, that it's storytelling. Evolution has wired our brains for storytelling. Why is that? Because a story puts the whole brain into action. There's learning process, there's memory, there's obviously emotion, so imagine how important it is for brands. The example that I'm going to show you is from Sun's research, one of my colleagues. And in this example, you can see how the story is working, how the brand Volkswagen took this story from Star Wars and make it meaningful for the brand. You can see underneath the EEG signals, the brain electrical activity, the eye tracking. You can see how all the different heat maps. So people are following completely the story, but more importantly, you can see how the heat maps on the brain, how the whole brain is working. People are making sense to the whole story. There's quite a flow of positive and negative emotions, and these are part of the story to keep our audiences engaged. And here, you can see at the end how Volkswagen was quite clever and where the peak of engagement and more positive engagement the brand is shown. So there's obviously the audience who was looking into the content and appraising it and being meaningful for the brand. And actually the brand was quite recalled. So then what is the takeout for you? Well, every brand needs a story. A story is that activates these famous mirror neurons, the empathy that we need. We need to make our consumers to make them feel what we feel. And also sometimes this Star Wars is a story that exists, but you want to capitalize. And some others you can make a story around it. If you are a food brand, explain where your ingredients are coming from. Tell a story about it. People will engage with it. The second human insight is faces. Faces are so important. Faces, even we have a brain region just to code these faces. Because if you think about all these faces are the ones who allow us to be and interact with the others. You know, if I'm sad, if I'm happy, if I smile, I make you smile, hopefully. And so the faces, in many, many examples that we have in advertising, for instance, where faces are normally quite used, is that they are driving the emotional engagement. Here we need to look for red. Red is approach, is positive engagement through the brain in this case. And here in the concept stage, faces were more visible and people were engaging to them. Whereas in the final act, we lost one bit of this execution and faces were more missed. And in this case, then we had more orange and more yellow, which means less emotional engagement. So imagine how important it is. So if you are working in creative development or in yeah, in communication development, it's important to show this close-up of faces, because faces are good to generate the emotional engagement that we are looking for, and they drive the attention to the elements that you want. The third human insight is around negative news. We are attracted to negative news. This is what obviously secures our survival. That's why it makes sense. In campaigns, social campaigns that try to change behavior, this is very important, because we have here, for instance, 3 similar executions with exactly the same message: stop violence. If I ask you, I'm asking you, this is not rhetorical, I'm asking you which of these visuals is going to be most effective? The first one, the second one, or the third one? Second one? First one? Third? So we have taste for third, okay. More blood, you Christine like blood, yeah? Well, actually, the most effective one is the first one. And why we are saying that? We are saying this based on the brain responses and also the eye tracking. So a combination of tools. Because what's happening in the third one is that people are so focused in the blood, as we said, very attracted, to the blood, to what is negative. And this kind of shuts down your brain. Your brain is so focused on this, and then the message, in kind of 2 seconds that this billboard has to impact in you, the message cannot cut through. Whereas in the first one, it's balanced. It generated the red that we were saying before, this approach, but at the same time, people are able to read the message. Okay, so shocking campaigns are important to change behavior. However, to know how much is too much is very important. The neuroscience can give you the reasons why sometimes this negativity can cause repression. Okay, the fourth human insight is one of the most favorite one, and this is linked to the whole story of the importance of the rational brain. Yes, guys, if you have a product superiority, just say it. Because the rational brain is there to convince it, to give reasons for this decision making. And here is an ad, which me as an advertiser, I don't really like it. But it shows, again, the red. This throughout the commercial.
We're introducing the new Best
We cannot, the sound is quite.
It's our most absorbent yet.
So, there's not much to hear, actually. It's really this demo, and how the product performance. And so it's engaging the whole ad, and right here, so in the product comparison with the competitor, the brain is so attracted. The brain is getting crazy, actually. We don't have that many examples with normal advertising. And also the activation, the GSR, so this is something that drives to action. And maybe you can say, and in a focus group, what happened with this ad was like, I don't like it. But actually, we don't care whether you like or not. Because what we are trying to see if it's effective. And sometimes go against this rational likability, but these things, sometimes you have to get the right balance without killing creativity, because our brains want these reasons to believe. The fifth insight is around music. I think music, the whole industry knows how important is music. And now, from neuroscience, we found out that actually we are wired to respond to music. Actually, pleasant music boosts serotonin, which is a chemical responsible for these good feelings. And also, imagine how important for advertising, engages the hippocampus, which is responsible and handles the long-term memory. And then in music, we have this example of, there were many titles that wanted to be in the theme of Quantum Solace, of the James Bond movie. You can see here the song, the first is from Alicia Keys, the one that actually won, because the public wanted to have this music in the movie. But Duffy, the one who didn't make it, if you see that I was saying before red, we need to look for red. All this theme would have been much better with Duffy than with Alicia Keys. We don't know why. I mean, it's difficult when someone is asked about which music you prefer for this art. It's actually difficult because I'm probably going to say that I like more this music than another, rather than what is going to convince or seduce my unconscious. Yeah? So what can I do with that? Well, actually, music, if we know that it's important, I think, guys, we need to test it. And if we ask people about this music, what the preferences, is quite difficult to see what music is going to seduce the unconscious. And I think the massive investment that a lot of brands do with this, we need to choose this properly and in a more reliable way, even when you are choosing something like the voice of a male or a female in a voiceover, this is obviously can have a huge impact. Another important insight is that we have, with all of these tools about with consumer neuroscience, we are able to measure emotions in a universal way. So we have the paradigms that allow us to measure in a universal way. However, how people appraise situations is different. That's why neuroscience is giving more clues about these cross-culture differences. In this art of the Chinese government was launched in 2011 in America. This is how Chinese were proceeding this art. And the only thing that has this art in terms of content is that different celebrities of the Chinese culture have been presented, and some ordinary people. Okay, and people just respond differently with more or less importance. For instance, Chinese don't like the ordinary people, and then the Americans love it. In here, you can see the responses to the ad, completely different in 9 countries that we tested. So different scenarios were obviously attracted by one culture and not the other. And some similarities, but this really puts on the table something about coffee for everyone, but just, you need to really see these differences and then try to take them into account when you are making maybe shorter versions for the different countries, because this can change completely the engagement. As I think I have been saying, so these emotions and feelings, global brands need to identify these differences and be able to make decisions based on them. Now is the last 6 insights that I wanted to take you through. The first one is about food and attention. We are wired to be attracted by food. This is our primitive brain. So every time you show food, you are going to have attention, or its absence as well. But if you are a food brand, I want to see the same activation when your logo appears that when this food, because otherwise it's just a generic stimulation of the brain. Then the second one is about the visual cues. In the shopper exercise, we know that people go with this autopilot. And people recognize the brands with maybe just the color shape. In less than a second, they can identify their choices and just grasp it. If this is true, how many times you have changed your color shape of your product, or maybe you don't understand well how consumers are navigating through this? So please, you have to identify them, be very sure how they recognize them, and don't make changes in your pack, because can have quite tough consequences. The 9th is the humor. Humor is wonderful. Everybody loves executions that make you laugh. And this is the case of Pepsi. We tested Pepsi, very funny ad, well, for men more than female, that sometimes happens. And facial coding was saying funny from the beginning to the end. But EEG, so long-term emotions, actually there was no connection whatsoever with the brand. So you could have a short connection with your consumers for a funny execution. But if you really want to capitalize this territory, you have to be very coherent and stick on it. Otherwise, humor, despite it puts the whole brain into action, it doesn't last that much. The 10th is the gender differences. I don't think that we needed neuroscience to say that male and female are different, because this is a fact. However, with neuroscience, we can see differences, but really the same is seen, and men and female, Jesus, the opposite. And what I can do with that? Well, if you are targeting really a specific target, you have to be sure that these differences are not causing any antagonism in the execution. But you have to take into account that if you are asking your rational mind, there are many differences that are not going to be said because they are not politically correct. And sometimes you cannot even articulate these differences. The number 11 is about memory. Memory is the glue of our experiences. And they are very important because when we identified in an advertising or in a piece of communication a creative magnifier that is able to trigger memory and the affective memories that we need in a store, we are going to be able to connect and to link these consumers with shoppers. It's when neuroscience can help you to drive conversion, because we can identify these creative magnifiers. The number 12 and last one is about brands, and this is really good news for brands, is that brands give values to objects. And we have seen in almost 5 times with exactly the same scene, with the object naked with no brand, no label, and with a label. And the massive attention that is driven by the brand is really important, that when sometimes you are discussing with your creative team, should we show it, is natural, is not natural, show it. Don't be scared, because it gives this value. Thank God that this is what is happening. So, there's much more to crack on, but I hope that you enjoy the presentation, and I think I have more questions than answers, but today I just showed the answers that some of the questions that I had before. So thank you very much, guys, and obviously, any questions?
Thank you, Cristina. That's great practical insight. Do we have any questions from the audience? Here's one.
I don't have all the answers, huh?
It's all right. I'm just looking for opinion right now. I look at all this neuroscience stuff, and first of all, that's the first time I've ever seen sort of eye tracking and brainwave tracking all at once. You win my vote for the coolest presentation at IIeX. What I wonder about all this, so we, traditional researchers like myself, rely on asking people how they feel about particular things. And you have some concrete data up there that you can go benchmark against, other experiences and have a real understanding of how their brain is actually reacting. Do you see this as a replacement for a lot of the sort of attitudinal work that we do on branding?
No, not, and really not, like with out of load. It's like I really think that the future is not consumer neuroscience. The future is the integration. And I really believe, and that's why now one is part of insights, with traditional offer, and the big achievement is how we are integrated both. Actually, I think all of the learnings from here are based on talking to consumers and ask them about their reactions, knowing more. Because neuroscience is giving you the what, still the what, but not the emotional why. We normally put qualitative after most of our neuroscience work, and obviously the discussion guide is based on the neuro results. But our team of qualitative people go with everything like very equipped, to talk about reactions that are just behavioral proofs. So like, we know that this happened. Tell me more about it. It's like a soundtrack, this neuroscience that giving you the whole song, and then you know what you are looking for. So therefore is when the magic comes up. But just neuroscience, I don't think. In some questions, for instance, about music, I wouldn't go to a consumer to ask, look, this song, you feel more engaged. Why? There's no point. I know that. Fine, next. But if I want to know why in this particular scene something is wrong, I don't know why. And then I still ask consumers to, even if it's a post-rationalization, but at least it's based on something that has happened. Did I answer your question? Thank
Wonderful. I have one more question for you. Anybody else in the crowd? So I loved your data showing the cross-cultural differences. When neuroscience first caught on and it was in its innovative stage, there was some message out in the marketplace that all you needed were 12 people, 12 women, 12 men in the room. It didn't matter who they were. And since you were measuring the brain, you had some kind of fundamental insight on the human reaction to your ad. And of course, those of us who were in the industry knew that it was patently false. I'm really happy to see that evidence that you're putting up on the screen. Are you willing to publish that evidence? Do you have permission to publish that evidence to the larger crowd so that we can all become educated on the importance of understanding the specific segment? That's my first question. And second, how do you, when you're recruiting for these studies, how do you handle that issue of getting the right people into the room? Because it's not just cross-culturally, right? It's within a culture, you could have different segments of people who may react differently to your particular ad.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, you can share. Yeah, if you quoted us, yeah, you can share it. Yeah, I think we have been publishing everything that we have done, so we are quite generous, and I think this is the future. You know, if we don't share, this industry cannot evolve. And yes, in the recruitment, obviously, I'm not in charge of recruitment, but we need to take into account that when we adopt like 40 people, we have to choose them very carefully because we need homogenic samples. If there's anything that could be heterogenic, we need to really increase sample size, and then duplicate samples sometimes, so depending on the number of stimuli. But the cultural differences and also, but it's again depending on the business issue, and what the client needed to know, and that we obviously change our initial kind of we said 40, but sometimes it's 60 and sometimes it's 80, depending on this heterogeneity, and so depending on the client and category. Sometimes it's important, sometimes it's less important. But we are different, so it's wonderful, I think, that we are different, but by the same brain. Yeah. But, yeah.
Well, it's wonderful that we can all benefit from your experience.
Thank you very much, guys.